Hey, everybody, and welcome to And Action Filmmaking Podcast. It's episode 55, and we are talking about the one and only WWE Hall of Famer actor Kevin Nash. And I'm here with my faithful co host, as always, Mikey Messier. Mikey, how the hell are you, brother?
I'm doing good, Tommy, and it's good to be here to discuss the life and times and our personal experiences with Kevin Nash, Big Daddy Cool, and good to be here. If the audience could tell us how our audio is doing, that would be great. Just make sure we're getting good audio today.
I think you could remove that mic and get it a little away from your face because it's just like echoing and booming a little bit.
How about now?
Yeah, that's a lot better. Sorry about that, guys. If everyone appreciate you hanging in there with us, we just had a little audio glitch this morning, but I'm gonna try and get that all sorted out. And we're gonna get underway. So we appreciate that everybody's here checking in with us. What's up, Stephen E? Good to see you as always. Scott's in the house. What's up, Scott? I love this. It's Happy Collective Week to all that celebrate. We most certainly do celebrate here. We're excited about that. We'll be talking a little bit about that later. Laza, what's up, brother? From Brisbane, Australia. We love seeing Laza here. And again, thanks, guys, for hanging in there. Michael Whitney, what's happening, brother? Good to see you. Ariana, what's up, Ariana? All right, everybody. We're sorry about those little technical jams, but we're going to get right into it here today. We are talking all about the WWE Hall of Famer, Kevin Nash. And it's kind of fitting that they're cutting trees down the road. You can maybe hear that in the background because Kevin Nash is the size of a tree. He's the largest human being that I've ever met, that I've ever worked with. But there's so much more to Kevin than just his nearly 7 foot, 300 plus pound frame. And today we're going to get into all that and more. Kevin's really one of the great people in the industry. And I just love hanging out with him. It's been a while, so it's going to be fun to reminisce on Big Daddy Cool himself. If you're not a wrestling fan, we're going to get into a little bit of wrestling backstory today. We're going to tell you a little bit about Kevin's life and how he got into acting and share some stories that we've had from our personal experiences. But before we get into that, Mike, we had a great episode last week on crew care. So if you haven't checked that one out, go check it out. I had a lot of crew members reach out to me and say, hey, thank you for making me feel seen. So, a lot of the things that we said seem to have resonated with a lot of the crew people out there that checked it out. And as mentioned earlier, we're excited about The Collective. That's my new movie coming out on Friday, August 4th. It stars Lucas Till, Ruby Rose, Don Johnson, Tyrese Gibson, Mercedes Varnado, for the wrestling fans out there. It's got Paul Ben Victor. It's a silly cast. It's just freaking silly. And I'm really excited to be a part of that film. And you're going to be all seeing it on Friday. But enough about that, Mike. Kevin Nash, what do you think, buddy? Probably one of the best big men in wrestling. But we're going to take it all the way back to his early roots as a young man growing up in Detroit, Michigan.
Yeah, Kevin Nash grew up in Detroit, Michigan, Motor City. Obviously, the home of so many great things. He was a basketball star. Just a really interesting athletic background. He's been plagued by knee issues because of basketball, and as we know, he found his way into wrestling and then into film. But what else should we say about his background? He's got a really interesting life.
Yeah, the cool thing about Kevin is, here's a guy who's reached some of the highest highs in professional wrestling that you possibly can. He's been a world champion. He's actually in the WWE Hall of Fame. But his early beginnings were very blue collar. Very blue collar guy. Grew up in Detroit. Hardworking blue collar city. And he just looks so fond of that. I love hearing. Kevin's a history buff, and in the time I've spent with him, I really like hearing about his stories about growing up in Detroit and how, at the time Detroit was one of the largest cities in the United States. It was booming. The Ford Motor Company was cranking, and they were employing tons of people, and it was a really kind of a hotbed. And I think Kevin got a chance to just really get exposed to a lot of different things in Detroit, and like Mike said, got into basketball, and just naturally, what a huge guy. I mean, I think he was probably nearly 6 feet tall by the time he was in middle school. So was very dominant on the basketball court and was quickly recruited by a lot of colleges. And if it weren't for a gentleman by the name of Irving Magic Johnson, he probably would have been the number one basketball prospect to come out of Michigan. Back whenever it was that he graduated high school. I want to say somewhere in the 70s, late 70s. So really talented athlete. Made his way to Tennessee, where he played basketball for the Tennessee Vols. That's D1 basketball. And if you're not a sports fan, back in the 70s and 80s, until the Tennessee Titans came along, Tennessee didn't have a professional sports franchise. So Tennessee Volunteer Sports was everything. It was mega. So that was kind of like Kevin's first bout with fame. The fact that he essentially was, a famous athlete in his own right in that Tennessee area. So it's kind of interesting, as a young man, before he even got into wrestling, he's used to playing, or I should say performing in front of thousands of people.
Yeah, and then that type of experience is super valuable, because when you have that comfort level of performing, whether it's in basketball or in acting or in wrestling, a rock star, if you are comfortable on stage with all the eyes on you, whether it's dozens, hundreds, or thousands, that's going to carry over into every endeavor that you do, whether it's sports or entertainment.
Yes, and that size that Kevin has, certainly, he's a very noticeable guy. Let's put it that way. When you're right about 7 feet tall and you're not one of these string bean type guys, you've got some size to you, you got some massive shoulders, big arms, big chest, big legs. He's really truly, in every essence of the world, what you'd consider a giant. As far as you're concerned, to me, that's a giant. But the difference between Kevin and a lot of other big guys is he's athletic. He's got mobility. He can move. He's got some speed. He's got some quickness. So Kevin started after college, ended up getting into the Navy, and from there started working in a lot of nightclubs and started getting into the nightlife, working as a bouncer, working security. And naturally, when you're working security, you're going to end up dealing with a lot of drunk assholes, and inevitably you're going to have to mix it up and throw a few fists, throw a few elbows, and really kind of, people always say professional wrestling is fake. That's a whole nother conversation, but I can assure you what Kevin Nash was getting into in the nightclubs, defending himself, protecting the people at the club, was certainly not fake, and he mixed it up, and he's a really tough guy and had to kind of handle himself a little bit. And when you're handling yourself, when you're cleaning house, people start to notice that. So Kevin certainly got a lot of attention for his size and was a pro wrestling fan. And was kind of approached by some people that like, hey, maybe you should give this pro wrestling thing a shot. And sure enough, he did. And what's unique about Kevin, and again, a lot of this has to do with not only his size and strength, but also he's a smart guy. He's a funny guy. He's a likable guy. He's the kind of guy you want to be around. So he really quickly climbed the ranks. I mean, a lot of pro wrestlers, they're training for like 2-3 years. They're working the indie scene. It's taking a long time before they get noticed. Kevin was able to sign a contract and get hired by a major wrestling company called World Championship Wrestling, really after not a whole lot of time in the business. He really excelled, and that's not a common thing. And like I said, it's got a lot to do with the intangibles that he has to go along with the freakishly large size that he has. It's just like, what a combination.
Yeah, I think the bouncing at the Atlanta nightclubs led to the wrestling, because the boys, as they say, Diamond Dallas Page, Lex Luger, Sting, those type of guys were always going to these nightclubs that Kevin was working at, and I think he struck up some friendships. And these guys are smart. They're Lex Luger's 6'5", but he sees a guy that's almost 7 feet tall, and he sees that this is a potential opponent, 5 or 10 years down the line. So I think he was kind of invited into the business by those guys, and because he's also a very likable guy. I mean, just on a personal front, we'll get into that, but Kevin Nash is known for his sense of humor. at times sarcastic, but usually in a surly way, like a surly, if that's the word. So I think these guys, the wrestlers, just took a natural liking to him, as most people do that get to meet Kevin Nash.
Mike, I don't mean to keep bringing up the audio issues, but it sounds extra like a drive-through window today. Is that a different headset that you're using?
Yeah, because we tried the original headset and it wasn't working before we went on the air, so I switched to this one.
Yeah, I don't know. End action people, comment on the line. I'm hearing it a little funny on my TV. If you're having trouble hearing mine coming through a little tinny, a little drive-through-ish, maybe drop a comment down and we'll see if we can fix that. Because we got a great show here. We're talking to Kevin Nash, and I want it to be usable.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm going to keep it going here. So, Kevin got into this wrestling thing and really just like a rocket kind of took off in terms of working for a major company on national television, traveling the road 300-something days a year. And then finally, he was hired by the World Wrestling Federation, as it was called at the time, now called WWE. And, well, that's where things really took off. It was in I want to say, somewhere in the winter of '94, I believe. Kevin Nash, then called Diesel, which was his nickname. He was basically a big truck driver, kind of badass. He won the world title from Bob Backlund in about 2 minutes.
8 seconds.
Yeah, it was like less. Yeah, it might have even. Yeah, wasn't it like less?
I think it was the time they said was 8 seconds. He basically gave him a kick to the stomach, a power bomb, and the pin. Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, and that was such a big deal because normally in the professional wrestling world, guys have to stick around the business for a long time before they get that opportunity. Within the first year of being in the business, Kevin Nash literally won every single title in the WWE. He was a tag team champion, he was a continental champion, then he won the world title. So talk about just a quick rise to fame in the wrestling business, Mike. That doesn't happen very often. A guy who's really in the business for maybe less than 5 years, he's a world champion.
Yeah, he came over to the WWE for the King of the Ring '93, and by April of '94, he was the Intercontinental Champion. I think it was August or September of '94. Him and Shawn Michaels were the WWF Tag Team Champions, and basically 2 days after Survivor Series '94, he won the title for Backlund. And so, I mean, talk about a breakthrough year, 1994. Winning all 3 major WWF titles, for wrestling fans, they know that that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, it is. And, for me, why Kevin Nash is a little extra special, in the wrestling world, if you're a fan of wrestling, I feel like we identify with whoever was the champ when you were like 10 years old. And in 1994, I was 10 years old, and Kevin Nash was the champ. And, I remember Hulk Hogan being the champion as a very little kid. But I didn't quite understand wrestling as deeply as I did when I was 10. By the time I hit 10, in my little child world, I was an expert on wrestling, and I knew everything about it. So, it's almost like, you always remember who was champ when you were a little kid, and that's why Kevin's got that little extra special kind of, almost like a real-life superhero to me.
Place in your heart. Yeah, it's like whoever you remember as the first president, you can remember, whether it's Dwight Eisenhower or Ronald Reagan or Bill Clinton. You always put that special time of your life on a pedestal. Hey Tommy, if the audience could give us another sound check, if the sound is really bad on my end, I can try my phone just because, like you said, we don't want to continue.
Scott said it's loud and clear, and he said I'm relatively quiet, so I'm going to try and yap up a little bit, and I guess we're good. Maybe it's just sounding weird on my TV. I mean, that's always possible. I just really want to nail this Kevin Nash episode because...
He'll nail us. He'll powerbomb us into a press table like Eric Bischoff.
Yeah, we wouldn't want that to happen. So basically, Kevin was working as Diesel and just crushing it in the WWE. And then finally... Kevin was starting a family, married guy, expenses, got to make more money, right? That's what we all want to do as professionals. We always want to make as much money as we can to support our families. And suddenly he got an offer from the rival company, WCW, the very company of which he started his really national wrestling career on. So he went back to where he started and got offered a very nice contract with guaranteed money. And it was literally working less and getting paid more. And Kevin is actually known as one of the first wrestlers to really treat the business like a true entertainment entity, kind of like how a movie star would have an agent. And Kevin had an agent working for him, working his deals out. A lot of these wrestlers back in the day, they got screwed, to be frank. They didn't have any representation. They were making bad deals, and basically they were painted into a corner. They were like, well, if I want to work for this company, I guess I have to do this. Kevin was one of the first guys to be like, well, wait a minute. We're the entity that people are watching on TV. We need a little bit more cheese on our Whopper, as they say, if we're going to be working 300 days a year and being away from our family. So Kevin went for the money. And let me tell you, talk about one of the greatest decisions a human being could ever make, because Kevin quickly formed an alliance with his best friend, Scott Hall, rest in peace, Scott Hall, and of course the legendary Hulk Hogan. And they formed a group called the New World Order, the NWO, which was basically an invasion angle, where this was like a secret society of wrestlers sent to take over the WCW. And it was a genius angle, and to this day goes down as probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, wrestling angles of all time. So much so that the merchandise made from that WWE run is still available on the WWE's website now. Like, you can buy NWO gear. In fact, I'm wearing an NWO t-shirt. There's Kevin Nash right there on my damn shirt. And I didn't buy this shirt in the 90s. This is like a brand new shirt. They're still making this stuff almost 30 years later. So talk about an impact when you really have, you really have one of these situations where this angle that these guys worked on many years ago, literally decades ago, is still making money. That's how hot it was.
Yeah.
Hold on, I got some audio critiques here.
Yes.
I think Mike could probably put his mic even further away, and we'd still be able to hear, and maybe that would fix it.
Which I've done.
Scott, and then Ariana.
Thanks, Scott.
I think the microphone is just very hot right now, causing Tom's audio to be quiet. I can hear his background ambient sound. Yeah, that's a good point. Mike, you might want to turn down your computer audio a little bit. I think it's picking up me talking.
Oh, interesting.
We're like the gang who can't shoot straight today, guys. We really appreciate you hanging in there with us. It's as if our StreamYard here was abducted by aliens this morning. But we're going to push through. All right, so the NWO, massive angle. Kevin continues his wrestling career. But during this wrestling career, he's got a lot of these moments where he's working in the movie business all along. One of the kind of more interesting stories to me, and I remember being shocked when I heard this, and I think it's one of those things where, like, a lot of people know this that are wrestling fans, but I don't think a lot of, people would really make the connection, because it was in the beginning of Kevin's wrestling career. But in 1989, during the famous Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, where everyone remembers that movie, right? You've got these humans in these weird turtle costumes, and it was like, I loved it as a kid, but looking back, I don't want to say it's hokey, but it certainly has its place in time. And the villain at the end of the movie is a character by the name of Shredder, who's this really, badass guy in like an armored costume and an armored helmet. And Kevin plays Shredder. So, one of the biggest, most iconic villains of the 80s, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Mike, real quick, give us like 2 sentences on just how big of a deal the Ninja Turtles were in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they're even bigger now, but during the 80s, they were the new thing. I mean, you take a look at things like Cabbage Patch Dolls or Tickle Me Elmo. I mean, every once in a while, there's some type of toy, pop culture phenomena, Barney. And the Ninja Turtles actually had some street cred because they were based on a comic book that was pretty dark and edgy that these 2 guys, I think from Vermont, actually came up with. And the Ninja Turtles were just the biggest thing going for anyone in their pre-teens to late teens to probably 20s and beyond, really.
You know what was so cool about the Ninja Turtles, not to take a sidebar? They were smart. They combined three things that they knew that kids would love. Karate, because martial arts was huge in the 70s and 80s with movies like The Karate Kid. Of course, you had the Bruce Lee movies in the 70s and you had movies like Karate Kid. So karate is as high as it comes for kids' excitement level. Pizza, little kids love pizza, right? You know, they're all about pizza. These are turtles that eat pizza. And of course, they're lovable turtles. They're creatures. Kind of fun. So it's like you've got a creature, karate creature pizza, karate creature pizza, karate creature pizza. Say that 10 times fast. All right, enough about the turtles. So Kevin was in this massive franchise playing Shredder. And he also was in a really great movie that, you know, this is one of my favorite fight scenes in any movie. If you watch the 2004 movie The Punisher, starring Thomas Jane and John Travolta, Kevin Nash plays a character called the Russian. Him and Thomas Jane have just such a scrap, man. It's one of the greatest fights in cinematic history. I really mean that. That's kind of like saying a lot. People might be like, "What? The 2004 Punisher movie?" Yes, watch that fight scene between Nash and Thomas Jane. It's fucking awesome, and what I love about it, it's a comic book movie, and this fight is right out of a comic book. It's just out of control. They're going through walls. It's just a lot of fun, and I don't think it gets enough credit as comic book movies are so popular now, and since 2004, that was a long time ago. It was almost 20 years ago. A lot's happened in the comic book world, so it's easy for us to forget some of the early comic book movies that kind of set the pace a little bit. But go back and rewatch the 2004 Punisher movie. That fucking scene still plays today, and I love it.
Yeah, and as you were saying about the New World Order, Tommy, I mean, for something, especially from World Championship Wrestling, to cross over into mainstream pop culture was really unheard of. You know, WCW had been around for a while with its roots in the National Wrestling Alliance, and they had big stars. They had Sting, they had Ric Flair, they had even Hulk Hogan. But when Kevin Nash and Scott Hall came over and made the NWO, that put WCW and the NWO on the map. And it just shows that Kevin Nash is a player. He's not just a player in pro wrestling or in film. He's a player in pop culture. And when you can accomplish that from any field, that's saying something.
So after his wrestling career, Kevin really focused on the world of cinema, and you can see him in movies like The Longest Yard, which is a great football movie. That's a remake of the Burt Reynolds film from, I want to say, the early 80s, maybe late 70s. And then he's also in Magic Mike. Kevin shows off some of his dance moves playing an adult entertainer, playing a stripper in the movie Magic Mike. And I remember hearing Kevin tell me about how lean he got for that movie and the diet that he went on and how, just so on point. We're going to talk a little bit about Kevin's fitness and his dedication to fitness, and really, just it's incredible because here's a guy who physically, as far as the shape that he's in right now, he has the body of like a 30-year-old guy. Like if you saw him with his shirt off, you'd be like, he's 28 years old. I mean, this
Right.
guy's practically ready to do a bodybuilding show at any point. He stays really lean, but he's got a lot of size, and it's a dedication, man. It's a lifestyle, and like I said, we'll get into that later because Kevin's inspired me a lot of ways, in a lot of ways, probably without him even realizing it, because he's always posting about the gym. His trips to the gym. He'll throw up a picture from training, and it's cool sometimes. You see somebody post a gym pic and you say to yourself, you know what? I should be training right now. I should get my ass in the gym. I haven't worked out in a couple days. So I've always found Kevin's posts on fitness very motivating, and I've gotten a chance to actually talk to him about it. And we'll get into that a little bit. Eventually, Nash winds up in the WWE Hall of Fame. He was enshrined not only as a solo act, but also as a member of the New World Order. So he's one of the few people that's in the Hall of Fame twice, with a short list right there. So really, just talk about the contributions to the pro wrestling world. He's one of these guys that, again, I know wrestling sometimes gets labeled as this real kind of boutique crowd. It's kind of a unique group of people. But in that world, I mean, he's a legend, and it's really cool because he's one of these wrestlers that kind of broke beyond that world where I think there are a lot of people that never watched a wrestling match in their life know who Kevin Nash is from his many film and television appearances.
Yeah, just a few other things that, he did a lot of work with Total Nonstop Action Wrestling or Impact Wrestling, which sometimes gets, forgotten about, but he was one of the people that helped that promotion be anything, really, because he brought the name value and he put a lot of work into it. And also, just a movie, Dog, another movie with was Tatum Channing. I always get that guy's name wrong, but the movie Dog, Kevin Nash has like a really great 20-minute, couple of scenes where he's like the main focus, and he actually, I mean, not that I'm surprised, but Kevin Nash is a quality actor. He's a quality guy, and when you need someone who's got a big presence, but what I like about Kevin's acting, Tommy, is that he kind of goes under. He doesn't do the histrionics and make himself like, no offense to Chris Farley, but he was always kind of going out above and beyond, which was good for Farley. But for Nash, he underplays it. So he just allows his natural charm and charisma to come through without exerting so much effort where it's obnoxious. So I appreciate his acting.
Yeah, Kevin's definitely got a lot of range, and you'd see this nearly 7 foot, jacked up 300-pound guy, and you probably immediately think that he's going to yell and scream and going to play the heavy all the time. And Kevin's so smart, man. He really is so smart, and he's often dubbed as one of the most high IQ wrestlers in the wrestling world. He was always known as a very highly intelligent man. I think and I don't know. I've never I've never given you a IQ test, but I've been told that Kevin's a genius, like actually tested genius levels in terms of where his IQ is at. So he's smart enough to understand that when you're 7 feet tall, jacked up with 300 pounds of muscle around you, you don't need to yell much. You don't need to be too big. Your body, your appearance is going to do the yelling for you. All you got to do is kind of just be nice and chill. And there's a reason why they called him Big Daddy Cool. I mean, we say this all the time. You can teach a lot of things in life. You can teach people how to do all certain different types of skill sets. You can teach a person to be a better orator and maybe speak a little bit better. You can teach a person to, now maybe if you were a shitty singer, I can sing a little bit better now. I can teach them how to play an instrument, play a sport. But you cannot teach cool. You just can't teach it. You're either cool or you're not cool. And Kevin Nash embodies that. He's just one of the most aware, cool people I've ever met in my life. And again, very approachable. And I think that that's part of, we're not just trying to give Kevin an hour worth of flowers here. I think what Kevin's getting at is, I think what Mike is getting at about Kevin's subtlety in his acting is, he's learned how to take that size and make it digestible for a person. Because let's face it, and I've heard this from my dear friend Nick Principe, shout out to Nick, who's not nearly as big as Kevin. Nick's about 6'7", still a massive dude, but when you're 6'7", 265, large guys have a tendency to learn how to make themselves a little bit softer and more approachable, because their whole lives, people have been kind of looking at them like, oh shit, don't make eye contact with this guy. Like, people automatically assume that you're going to be mean, or you're going to be tough, or you're going to be scary, or you're going to try to fuck with them. So a lot of big guys that I've met, especially the smart ones, they have this really wonderful ability and charismatic charm about them, so that you realize right off the bat, like, I know I'm huge, but I'm a safe person. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm friendly. So Kevin's a really friendly guy, and I think that's probably something that, I'm not a psychologist. I don't want to use terms like defense mechanism, but I bet you that's kind of like a defense mechanism that you develop over the years from being such a big person. Like, well, shit, I better be a little charming here.
Well, Tommy, the funny thing is I actually met Kevin Nash as a fan back when I was a pretty small kid. I happened to be at LaGuardia Airport, and lo and behold, Kevin Nash and Shawn Michaels were in the airport the day before SummerSlam '95. And, just as a huge wrestling fan, of course, I immediately recognized these guys. And they were very open to just giving me an autograph and talking a little bit about the wrestling world, for just a few minutes. But that felt very good as a young kid that, Kevin Nash and Shawn Michaels would take 5 or 6 minutes out of their traveling to talk to a fan, me. So I always remembered that. And then 20 something years later, when we're in a movie with them, it was nice to kind of have that full circle type of thing.
Well, they always say Vince McMahon, the founder of the World Wrestling Entertainment, his big line was, "I want my champion to be able to stick out in an airport." Meaning, if you were in an airport and you were walking down finding your terminal, you don't have to know shit about wrestling. When you see this giant of a man, you know he's somebody. And Kevin, I would say, out of on a short list of guys like literally Hulk Hogan, we're talking like people that are just going to stand out when you see him. Kevin's definitely one of them. And we're about to jump into the fun part of our show now, where we're going to spend the second half of the show talking about our experiences with Kevin. And let me tell you, Mike and I have had the pleasure of being in Kevin's company many times in public, and it's so fun it's just fun to observe. You walk into a restaurant and immediately heads just turn and people are just going to be looking at you, and it's like when you have Kevin with you, you're going to attract a little bit of a crowd. And again, it's just, even if you're not a wrestling fan, just to see somebody who's, like I said, 7 feet tall, you're going to pay attention to that.
Most definitely, and he's just a guy who commands attention, and he's always been a pleasure to be around. I just followed Chad Palmer's audio advice. This is Kevin Nash, Tommy. He really is a very approachable guy, very hardworking guy. I wanted to say about when you mentioned his Instagram posts about his weightlifting. At this point in his life, Kevin Nash has plenty of money. He has nothing to prove, so to speak. So for him to still have the dedication to go to the gym and eat right, that just shows that he loves it. He loves being in good shape and taking care of himself. And if anyone had an excuse with, the aforementioned, I think he's had something like a dozen or more knee surgeries in his life. He's had plenty of options to say, well, my knee hurts, I'm not going to the gym. But still he goes, because that's the type of guy that he is.
Yeah, it's hardwired in there. All right, let's talk about The Assault. So The Assault is a movie that I was in as an actor. Kevin was playing one of the bad guys in my syndicate. I played a criminal in this movie. Those kind of roles are always a lot of fun. And I remember it's funny how you remember where you are when cool things happen. I remember I was in Las Vegas on a trip, and I'm in line getting breakfast. I'm like trying to get like an egg sandwich, and I'm texting with my friends, and I'm talking to David Gear. I'm talking to producer Richard Switzer. These are the guys that are going to be making the movie. And they're talking about, we think we got a chance to get Kevin Nash in this movie. And I am just so fucking excited. I'm blowing up the text chain. And way more excited than they would be. But the truth is, actually, that might not even be true, because David's a huge wrestling fan and Richard's a huge wrestling fan. So we were all kind of, as the wrestling fans say, marking out on this text chain, thinking that we have a shot at him. Sure enough, Kevin agrees to do the movie, and I get to set. And this is where I got to say, David Gear, we've talked about him on the show many times, and he's just a really cool guy when it comes to introducing people. Because I remember Kevin was shooting a scene nearby, and he was going to be at the local diner. I'm a big breakfast fan. I love breakfast. And I wasn't even working that day. And David hit me up in the morning and was like, hey, man, I'm going to go get breakfast with Nash at the diner. Do you want to join us? That would be like a nice way for me to intro you guys. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'm there. So I get to the diner. And right away, man, David gave me the what I call the hot intro, where he's just like, hey, man, this is Tommy. He's a big wrestling fan, but he's a great director, great actor. I think you guys would really like each other. Loves bodybuilding. And at the time, I was a lot bigger than I am now, believe it or not. Like, this is going back a few years ago. I'm weighing around, believe it or not, like 165, 170 now. Back then, I was probably like 210, and I was working out like a fucking maniac, and I was pretty jacked up. And there's something about muscle, guys. two meatheads, as we affectionately call it, they're either going to clash and not like each other, like Japanese fighting fish, and we're like, ooh, you're a meathead, I'm a meathead, I don't like you, and there's going to be like a this weird thing, or it's going to be like this magic moment when we're both two big meatheads, and you kind of just like love each other, and it's like you're talking about bodybuilding, and oh, I'm going to get the egg whites, and yeah, I'm going to get one piece of wheat toast, 6 egg whites, 1 yolk. So right away, we're talking about what we're going to eat at breakfast to get our protein in. And we're rocking and rolling, and we just vibe. So we had that bodybuilding connection. We had that wrestling connection. And then within a matter of 10, 15 minutes, it's like we're buddies, And it was really cool because after that, the whole few days that we were on set together, that ice was broken and we were buddies. So that was really cool, David. I'll never forget that breakfast. And I'll never forget, this is a hilarious story. And I'm just going to say it quick. I probably should save stories like this to the end, but why not? It's free. We're free flowing. There was one day when Kevin said that he was going to work out the next morning. He was going to get a workout in. And I wanted to work out with Kevin so fucking bad. I always wanted to say that I had a workout with him, kind of a deal. And I'm working out, and I get there. I didn't know what time, and I show up at like 9 o'clock. I'm looking at my watch, and I'm like, all right, I'll do some warm-up sets. I'm doing some warm-up sets. It's like 10. He's still not there. And then suddenly, like 10:15, I did like a whole routine here, man. Like, I'm getting tired. Like, do I leave and come back? Like, what am I going to do? Now I'm going to look weak if he does show up because he won't realize that I've already worked out. So if we're to like do a workout, why are you so weak? Well, I've been working out for the last hour. I got really nervous about it. And then finally, like, Kevin showed up, and I was just about done. And I think I did like a couple bullshit sets, like, to finish off. And I was like, oh, what's up, brother? Good to see you. Awesome. Yeah, just did a little shoulders. Awesome. I'll see you later. So, like, I waited in the gym for like 2 hours so that I could work out with Kevin. And it ended up really me doing, like, I don't know, I had probably moved on to triceps by then. I did like every body part because I'm hanging there so long. But I can technically say I did a couple exercises while Kevin was in the gym as well, also exercising. So I can check that off the box. I worked out with a heavyweight champion of the world, God damn it.
It counts. It counts, Tommy. It all counts. Yeah, and he's very approachable. He's a good guy. And yeah, some more stories from that situation. I mean, that was an interesting time, the assault, and I think I was assigned to be Kevin Nash's bodyguard from our buddy DG David Gear there, which was kind of unusual because I'm like, why do I need a bodyguard? He clearly was afraid that people were going to hit up Kevin for autographs and pictures and selfies and so forth, and kind of slow down the progress because he wasn't going to be on set for many days. So I kind of was assigned as this, assigned to be a volunteer to keep the fans away from Kevin. And I remember I made a little speech to everybody, which maybe I shouldn't have, who knows. But I said, hey, everybody, we got Kevin Nash here. He's a great guy, but please, let's give him his privacy. Please no requests for autographs or pictures with him today. And then Kevin just kind of speaks up after I said this whole big convoluted speech. I don't mind selling autographs. He just kind of cut it from under me.
He basically made you look like a big dumbass.
Yeah, so
he's trying to be approachable to his fans, and it's one of those things. Listen, this happens all the time. A lot of times, like a promoter or a producer, they'll set down these stipulations to protect the talent, and the talent really doesn't mind. They're friendly. And here's the thing: we're talking a movie set, so it's not like we were in the middle of a mall and like hundreds of people were going to mob him. Like maybe a dozen people would have come up to him throughout the course of the day. But hey, you know what? I appreciate David for at least being like, Kevin, let's let Kevin focus on his role and not worry about having a glad hand, folks. But let's talk about, so in this movie, again, Kevin plays sort of like a gangster of some kind. And I remember I didn't have a scene with Kevin in the movie. And this is where it's kind of funny, like thinking back, I'm surprised this actually worked. But I remember going to Richard Switzer and talking to produce, Richard was a producer on the movie, and talking to him and talking to David Gear and being like, guys, can I talk to Jacob, the director, about maybe inserting a scene where I kind of explain some things that I got to be honest, and I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but the script had a couple of minor plot holes in it. And I was like, listen, this isn't just me egotistically wanting to be in a scene with Nash. There are a couple of minor, I didn't say plot holes because that would have been mean, but I was like, there are a couple of things that might make a little more sense if in the beginning of this scene, I show up, I say a couple words of encouragement to Kevin's character, and then I quickly leave. That way the audience knows that we're in fact working together. Because a big mistake sometimes, guys, and writers pay attention to this shit. People assume, I shouldn't say people, writers assume that the audience is going to memorize the fucking names of the characters in the movie. So they think that with some lazy writing, they can just say, you know, again, well, Steve and Jimmy work together. Well, if you don't know who Steve or Jimmy is, what fucking good is it? Whereas if I'm actually watching a scene with these two bad guys interacting, I don't need to know what their fucking names are. I already know, oh, I saw the two of them doing bad guy shit together. So that later on in the scene, you don't need to use some cheap dialogue where it's like, oh, yeah, he works with so-and-so. Who the fuck is so-and-so if you haven't been paying attention, you know? So this scene kind of just shored up the fact that these two characters are bad guys and they work together. So never assume that the audience is paying attention to the names of the characters, because the reality is you only say the names of the characters maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4 times unless it's the lead. And then what, you're going to remember them from the fucking credits at the end of the movie? You already watched the movie. So that's my rant on that shit.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Tommy, is exposition can only get a writer so far. Exposition being the dialogue that explains things as opposed to actually showing things visually. And in this case, you're right. If two characters are supposed to be like the bad guys sect, rather than just have dialogue from other characters that places them together, have a scene. And so I'm glad that you spoke up about that. And that could be a whole other show, but let's get back on the Kevin Nash.
Yeah, this was a cool. The cool thing about this scene was they were already shooting this poker scene, and again, this is where people ask me a lot, like, "Well, Tommy, what's it like being a writer, a director, and an actor?" And it's like, well, this is where like you can sometimes use all of those skills together and help yourself in a situation. Because I quickly realized, well, they're shooting this poker scene where Kevin Nash is about to play poker with all these bad guys. I can just start the poker scene, which they're already shooting. I'm going to walk up to Kevin, say a couple words. He says a couple words back, and then I leave. We're already there. So what I'm suggesting, this is something that actors can learn. If you're suggesting something to production as an extra scene or something additional, make it fucking easy. Make it so that, guys, we don't have to go anywhere else. I'm not asking you to go to a different location. I just want to start this scene off with Kevin, say some words, and leave. And Jacob's a really cool guy. I've worked with Jacob many times. It made sense to Jacob. And he was like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's do it. And I think Jake scratched out some dialogue. We worked a couple beats. And it's a really great scene. And quick funny aside, Kevin's so fucking tall that the grips had to literally build a platform of apple boxes so that I can walk across this platform and stand and be in the same shot as Kevin. Because I'm 5'10". On a good hair day with boots on, I might be 5'11", but I'm a 5'10" guy. Kevin's literally a fucking foot taller than me. So when you're framing him up, you got to do some fun tricks. So it was kind of fun for me to do a little catwalk over to Kevin just to keep my goddamn head in frame. So that was a lot of fun, and I'll never forget that scene. And still fun to look at these, you know, once in a while, watch that scene back and be like, oh, that was a great time.
An offset, just a couple of little things. I think there was a night where we all went to Chicago Sam's, and of course, Kevin's kind of the center of attention and the head of the table, and just kind of being out with him in public is kind of fun because you can kind of see the next twists and the occasional person asking for an autograph or a handshake and so forth. And Kevin, it was, like we said, Big Daddy Cool, and then even at the hotel, one of the nights during that filming, he really loves telling stories. And I kind of felt like we were watching our own wrestling shoot interview. Like Kevin was telling us some pretty behind the scenes, inside wrestling stories of what goes on behind the scenes, and it was pretty fascinating. And it seems like he's just a guy who enjoyed that social aspect. And so we hear these anecdotes of film stars hiding in their trailers, for hours on end, and he's not like that at all. At least not with us. He was very welcoming and very one of the boys, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that Kevin, anyone who knows anything about wrestling knows that these wrestlers travel around with each other. They're in the cars making these long drives from town to town. And there's a lot of camaraderie and fellowship that goes with being a part of that. So I think that kind of fellowship translates to Kevin if he meets a few people that he finds that he's comfortable with. I think that kind of camaraderie extends, from the back in the wrestling world to working with, just hanging out and building relationships with people on the movie set. Like you said, a lot of people, a lot of actors I've worked with, when it's time for them to go home, they're going into their room and you ain't seeing them again until the next day. Kevin's going to hang out. He'll be, hanging in the hotel lobby. He'll have a drink with people. And, again, it's not like about having a crazy wild time. We're not talking about wild partying. We're literally talking about a few guys sitting down in some comfy chairs, eating some pizza, having a snack, whatever, and just listening to Kevin talk about the business. I mean, if you're a fan of entertainment and of wrestling, I could listen to Kevin Nash talk for hours and hours. And certain nights I have. I mean, we've literally hung out with him until the sun's gone up. He's notorious for these overnight sessions where, like, he can just hang out all night. We'll just be hanging out, till 5 a.m, talking about what happened that day, talking about the movie, talking about wrestling. Just some really great times. In that particular meeting, I believe Tom Sizemore was actually on set. Rest in peace, Tom Sizemore. And I remember Kevin and Tom got along because they're both Michigan guys. They're both Detroit guys. And they kind of knew a lot of the same things and a lot of the same people. And they were both basketball players. So it was really fun to watch them chat it up. One night, pro wrestler Tommy Dreamer showed up. And it was cool to see that instant, kind of connection between the two wrestlers, the boys as they call it, and they shared wrestling stories. So I'm like a tennis official, just like watching the tennis ball go back and forth, just watching Kevin and Tommy talk back and forth, and it was really just a great time. One other kind of fun story. Remember earlier I told you that Kevin Nash defeated Bob Backlund for the WWE title back in 1994 in 8 seconds. Well, Bob Backlund's from Connecticut, and we shot this movie in Connecticut. So there's a scene where Kevin Nash is laying on an ambulance. He's on the gurney. And there he is between takes. It's wintertime. It's fucking freezing outside. Kevin's like just waiting for this thing to start up. He's got like special effects makeup on him because he was shot in the scene. And then all of a sudden, somebody just grabs him and starts yelling in his face. And Kevin looks up, and it's Bob Backlund, the man that he defeated for the world title, 20-something years earlier, because Bob is friends with David Gear. And David was like, hey, your old buddy Kevin Nash is on set. And Bob was like, oh, I'd love to go see him. I'd love to say hi to him. David invited him to set, and Bob was like, oh, I want to surprise him. Let me surprise him. And it was just really fucking cool to see that moment, man. I mean, again, as a wrestling fan, and at the time, Bob was a much older gentleman. Bob's got probably 15, 20 years on Nash. So it was just really cool to see these kind of, as they say, two former world champions, one guy who beat the other guy for his title. And here they are 20-something years later hugging in a parking lot and having a laugh. It was a really cool moment.
Yeah, well, Bob wanted a rematch, obviously. So yeah, Bob Backlund's a very good guy as well, interesting character. So it is kind of heartwarming to see these old rivals turn friends years later.
Yeah, and Mike, speaking of friends, you did a really friendly thing to me. Mike went to a local junk shop or whatever, and he discovered there was a Kevin Nash action figure. And sure enough, actually, you know what? Here he is, guys. Mike found this Kevin Nash action figure for me at a junk shop. And sure enough, on the last day of shooting, I went up to Kevin and I said, Kevin, can you sign this for me? And there he is, right on the chest. Kevin Nash. So
I would say it wasn't a junk shop. It was a fine collectible store, Tommy. Come on.
I prefer Junk Shop. It's much
No,
cooler.
there's no junk.
Like, don't let the truth get in the way of a great story.
Yes.
So basically, Kevin signs my action figure. I shake his hand, and in my mind, that's it. That's the last time I'm going to see him, right? I mean, how many
Yeah.
times have you worked on a movie? You become fast friends with someone, you're like buddies, and then all of a sudden they're gone and you don't see him ever again in your life. That happens all the time in movies. But that wasn't the case here. That was not the case because about a year later, there's a movie called Blood Circus, which David Gear produced. Sure enough, went back to his old buddy Kevin Nash, cast him in the movie, and also went back to his old friend Tommy DeNucci, cast him too. Kevin had a much bigger role in this movie. I had nothing to do with him. I was literally just like a day player. I played like some jackass in a bar who gets his ass kicked by the main character. Um, but I had a fun time doing it, and I remember the scheduling worked out so that I was on set the same week that Nash was in town, and we picked up right where we left off. In fact, that one was a little bit different. It was already like home cooking. We already had the rapport, and I remember I was really into bodybuilding at the time, and it was cool, man. Nash and I had dinner together, just me and him, because David was supposed to meet us and something happened with his schedule. So it was just the two of us eating dinner in the hotel room. And like, here I am, like, again, like the little 10-year-old in me who would beg my parents to get a pay-per-view to watch Kevin Nash wrestle on a Sunday night, is now sitting down with him having dinner, hearing about various bodybuilding techniques and the kind of lifts that he does and the kind of food that he eats and the kind of diets and supplements. And I'm like under the learning tree listening to Kevin just go about, all these things that went on to really improve my workouts and my physique and all that stuff. So Kevin's just a great guy. We had a blast with him. And again, we had a few of those marathon nights where we were just kind of kicking it and having a great time. And then, Mike, a few years after that, you and I worked with him on a movie that Mike and I co-wrote with a couple of other gentlemen, two cousins writing. The movie's called The Manor, and this was an interesting movie, Mike. Tell us a little bit about Kevin's character and The Manor, Reverend Thomas, the True Believers. This one's a little different. This is a different character.
Yeah, Kevin's character is Reverend Thomas, who's the leader of the True Believers, and they're kind of written as this kind of vague cult that comes to the manor and is kind of a distraction from the chaos that's already happening. They're their own version of chaos, and but Kevin, the way he approached the character and the way maybe we tailored it to fit him is that his character, his version of Reverend Thomas is very approachable, and he has a pretty heartwarming scene with our lead, Christina, who plays our lead there, and that was a really nice, gentle scene. And then I actually had like a little confrontational scene with Kevin, which was good for me. It felt good to have a little bit of a moment where I'm kind of going against Reverend Thomas as Ole Baton. And I remember one person on the set looked over at Kevin Nash and said, "That's the biggest human being I've ever seen in my life," which is pretty accurate for most people. I mean, I think most people, if they ever work with someone who's 7 feet tall and so forth, but as big of a
Real quick, not to interrupt you, but like, here's the thing about the size, and it's not just the height. Like, I've met 7 foot people before, or 6'10" guys. I've been around professional basketball players a couple times. The difference with Kevin is he's fucking enormous. He's jacked out of his mind. He's got probably close to 20-inch arms. Like, it's not just the height. Like, I think people often think that, like, oh, he's tall. It's like, no, his shoulders are like it's like a fucking refrigerator coming at you.
yeah, and he does, but he is shy of having giantitis. Andre the Giant actually had a condition, giantitis. Kevin doesn't have that, so
Marfan
he
syndrome.
right. So Kevin actually looks really good. He's just a good looking guy, bigger.
He does not have a pituitary gland enlargement to get.
No.
He's just a large human being, but he's very much to scale. But
Yeah.
again, they don't call him Big Sexy for nothing. He's known to be one of the more handsome wrestlers out there. The Manor was a great experience. Again, we've talked about this before, but the Manor is the kind of deal where Kevin's not playing this big, scary, tough guy. Kevin's not playing a fighter. He's not playing a gangster. He's a lovable man who preaches peace, and he's there to stop a demon through, the powers of prayer and positive thinking. And it's just a really cool character that's a little different. And yeah, he's got a great scene with Christina Robinson. And I think a lot of people would like that movie because it's just so different. So check out The Manor if you haven't seen it.
It's also interesting that Kevin's on the cover of the DVD cover. Is I don't know how much you want to say on air, but off air you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of funny. I remember chatting with David about it, and David kind of laughed, and Kevin was like, "Man, I was there for one day." Because here's the deal, Kevin's always gonna work with us a little bit financially in terms of, he's not going to hold us over the coals for the money, but it costs a lot of money to work with Kevin Nash. There's a certain price of doing business. And on this particular movie, we could really only afford to bring him in for one day. That's how it works on a lot of these smaller movies. And guys, that's not a Kevin Nash thing. That's a everyone thing. On these small movies, there's a formula, right? It's a little bit of a trick. It's a little bit of a tool that we use where we're going to really only be able to afford to pay one name actor, and we can really only afford to have them come in to work for maybe 1 or 2 days. And that's just how it is on a lot of these small movies. Again, The Manor was made for like under $150,000. It was an extremely low budget movie. So yeah, we could really only afford to bring him in for one day, and he was our star. So a lot of times the distributors will maybe be a little deceptive to the audience. And again, it's just a sales tactic. That's literally part of the price of doing business. That's part of the job. But they'll put the biggest name that they have to offer on the cover of the movie, even if that character is maybe only in the movie for a collective 10 minutes, 9 minutes. And then you watch the movie and you say to yourself, all right, I'm waiting for so-and-so to show up. And they're in 1 or 2 scenes, and you say to yourself, "We've all been there." You're a little gypped. You're like, "Oh man, I thought this was going to have Steven Seagal in the whole movie. He's in one scene and he dies." That's a deep cut from Executive Decision in 1995. I was disappointed as a kid, but yeah. So that was one of those things where I think Kevin was like, "Oh wow, put me on the cover." I was there for a day. Awesome.
It's because we like you so much, Kevin.
Yeah, everybody. Well, you know what? He looks good on the cover, man. I remember seeing that and be like, all right, we got Kevin on the cover. And that's the other thing too, man. A lot of times, like, I'm a producer of that movie. I've directed a lot of movies where people think that like I sit there and pick out the artwork for the cover or the DVD or even the poster. I don't. On a lot of these movies, that is completely out of my hands. As soon as the movie's sold and it goes to the distribution company is picking out all that shit. Now listen, is that the case for every director? No. If you're Quentin Tarantino, you're gonna say, "This is what I want on the fucking poster," and they're gonna put it on the poster. I ain't Quentin Tarantino, so it's one of those things where I'm at the mercy of the distributors sometimes. So if you ever want to yell at me someday because you don't like one of my posters, chances are I don't like it either, and I had nothing to do with creating it.
We did have a nice review, just to give you a shout out. The Collective got a nice review today online, and the trailer's out for that movie, the 2-minute trailer, so people can watch that hopefully this week in time for our next episode that'll feature that.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. We'll do a little collective wrap up at the end of the show just to get everybody ready for next week. We're very rapidly approaching the end of our Nash episode. I want to tell a quick funny story. I got 2 fun hotel stories with Kevin Nash. One was pro wrestlers are known to be sort of road chiropractors, right? They're always banged up. They always got some kind of nagging injury lingering from years and nights of 300 nights a year banging on your body. So they know how to kind of crack each other, manipulate each other, so that if you're in a little pain, well, you don't have time to go to the doctors, but come here. I'll crack your back. I'll pop your shoulder back into place. I'll fix your neck. So we're hanging out one night, chilling, talking wrestling, talking movies. And I kept like grabbing my neck. I'm like, oh man, my neck is fucking killing me. I had physically exerted myself, and my neck was just fucked. Okay, everywhere I moved, it hurt. I couldn't turn my head. I was literally like, when you're doing this thing, you got to turn, and instead of turning your head, you got to go like,
Yeah,
what?
turn your shoulders. Yeah.
What? Yes. So I'm doing all those dances, and Kevin says, Tommy, your neck hurts? Come here. And I go, okay. Now Kevin's sitting in like the computer chair in the hotel, right? I'm sitting on the floor because there's a few other guys in the room. All the chairs are occupied. I'm just chilling on the floor. So he goes, come here, come over to me. So I'm sitting on the floor, and Kevin is in a chair, and he's looming over me, and his massive hands wrap around my head and my neck, and he goes, this is gonna hurt, but it's gonna feel really good. And I'm terrified. I'm frankly goddamn terrified. I have the largest person I've ever seen. He's grabbing my neck, and he just twists and like snaps my neck, and you could literally hear a massive pop followed by like pop, and I scream. I go, ah, fuck, oh my god, and I'm moving around. I'm twisting. I'm a new man. He completely fixed my fucking neck in like
Traction.
seconds with some old school pro wrestling road chiropractic. I don't know what that is.
Chiropractic.
Old school chiropractor action, and I'm good as new. I'm feeling like $1 million. And I was like, Kevin, that was fucking incredible. Thank you very much. And he's like, yeah, we used to do this every night, So it felt really good. And then this is the other funny hotel story. I don't think I have to say it again. Kevin's gigantic. And our neighbor there, the person next to us in the hotel next to us, was kind of being loud, kind of causing a problem. And, banging on the wall occasionally. Kevin would maybe bang back. And finally, it stopped. But then the security came. Hotel security came to his room. And the security guy, opened the door and gave Kevin, started almost with a little attitude, like, sir, you guys are... And he just looks up at Kevin, and he's like, "Oh, we heard a noise complaint." And the guy's whole demeanor just changed. And Kevin's just looking down at him like, "Wasn't us, man. You got to go next door. That's them making all that noise." And this guy's just like, "No problem, sir. We're going to go check that out right now. We're so sorry for disturbing you." So it was just one of those things where imagine being some tough guy, hotel security, trying to, lay down the law. You open the door and it's just like, "Oh, hi." And it was just funny. That was just a fun moment to see his total demeanor change. Needless to say, nobody got thrown out of the hotel that night. All was well. But just lots of great times with Kevin, man. I can't tell you enough. What just you hate to use terms like this, but he's just a regular guy. He's a real person. He's got again that blue collar Detroit mentality to be just kind of a regular dude is still very much with him, despite reaching incredible heights of success, both financially, both in fame. I mean, he's done so well for himself. And also, we have to say, you hate to bring this up because it's so tragic, but we're sending our deepest condolences out to Kevin and his family. They endured a real tragic with the untimely passing of their son, Tristan, who was only 26 years old. And Kevin was always a really big family man. And it's just awful to see, and we wish him well with that. And, again, deepest condolences for his loss, which was not too long ago. And, that's a kind of pain that never goes away, no matter how long it is. So we're thinking about Kevin. And again, I'm inspired to see how Kevin's been able to fight through that and stay positive and get through it. And again, these fitness posts that he makes, he said something really poignant the other day that almost gives me chills thinking about it. And he said something, I'm paraphrasing, but it was just a picture of a 45-pound plate or a picture of a dumbbell. And he was basically this is the only place that makes sense. 45 pounds today weighs the same as it's going to weigh next week and the week after that and the week after that. Just how consistency and that the gym can give him peace. So Mike, you had said earlier, I think a big part of that fitness and that love to get in the gym and that desire to stay in shape it's not remotely from a place of vanity. I think it really is like that's his peaceful place. That's his outlet. That's his therapy. That'll you hear it all the time. Iron therapy. Banging on those weights. That makes sense to Kevin. That's a place that makes sense to him, and I loved hearing that. And man, I've had some really bad days in my life when going to the gym and working out. It's like that is the only thing that makes sense that day. So I really connected with that. And again, I had to come out here and say my deepest condolences to Kevin.
Yeah, the steel plates never lie, and I would just say that if anyone wants more of Kevin's take on that situation, his podcast was ongoing at the time. His son Tristan actually did the theme music for Click This, the podcast that Kevin was doing with Sean Oliver and continues to do. And the week of Tristan's tragic passing, Kevin didn't take a week off. And they did the podcast, him and Sean Oliver, and he said that he could hear Tristan telling him spiritually, "Dad, don't stop the show. The show's got to go on." And they did a really expansive tribute to his son, which I listened to. I know you listened to it, and if anyone feels that they want to check that out, I would suggest it. And
overall, if you want to follow Kevin Nash, you can check him out at Real Kevin Nash on Instagram. He's a great follow, and I highly recommend you checking him out. I think you'll find him inspiring. I think you'll find him funny. And again, there's a reason why he's WWE Hall of Famer. He's a movie star. He's just a well-loved guy, and like Mike pointed out earlier, he's carved out a place in pop culture fame, beyond wrestling. He's kind of one of these characters where a lot of people, you throw up the Wolfpack NWO symbol, people know what that means, man, across the globe. So talk about making an impact. We're really excited about that. He's the complete package. And I think, Mike, unless you have any closing words on Nash, I'd love to just talk about the collective for a few minutes before we wrap up.
let me just say this about Nash. I think one thing we didn't get into, and I'll just cover it quick, is that being a big guy did not necessarily make him WWF World Champion overnight. He started in WCW. He was put in a tag team called the Master Blasters. His partner quit on him early. They gave him a substitute partner. He was repackaged first as Oz, which is one of those top 20 worst wrestling characters. He was literally like the tribute to the Wizard of Oz movie. And then they repackaged him a third time as Vinny Vegas, which was kind of halfway there to what we came to know as Diesel. And when they brought him over to the WWF, it's because Shawn Michaels liked what he saw and said, I could hang out with this guy, and this guy would be fun to hang out with and team up with. And Shane McMahon gave him the name of Diesel, apparently. So his life has got so many interesting things. It's like he's lived at least 2 lifetimes, the wrestler, the film star, and we continue to wish him luck. And let's hear about the collective, buddy.
Yeah, Mike, just to sum that up, I think we can all find a little inspiration in Kevin because, like you said, it wasn't just a fast track to the top. He had his failures and he stuck with it. And hard work meets a little bit of luck, meets a little bit of boom, off to the races. So Kevin Nash is an awesome guy. I love talking about him today, and I hope to see him again real soon. Like I said, it's been a few years. So, and also this was his birthday month. He just had a birthday on July 9th. So happy birthday, Kevin. Now, let's talk the collective, guys. The collective is really exciting stuff. It's going to be on Apple TV. I see Scott asked if it'll be there internationally. I can't guarantee, but I would assume it will be. But I'm sure that there will be some way for you to watch it, Scott. We're really excited about that. We're going to be talking about all that and more next week. We're going to do a real deep dive. I didn't want to do it this week because I want to do it next week when I'm legally, contractually allowed to give spoilers, talk about the movie. If we did it today, I wouldn't have really been able to say a whole lot because the movie's not out yet. Next week, I can reveal the curtain. This is me pulling the curtain up. So we can talk all about it next week. I'm excited for that. Again, guys, all the shares, all the likes, anytime you post this show up on your story, I'm always posting promos. It means the world to me if you share those out. Really appreciate it. We're slowly growing this thing, man. Every week, more and more people watch it, and it really just means the world to me. So thank you so much for helping us grow. I'm going to go back now and take a look at some of the comments here, and we'll see you next week. All right, let's go down the line. It is collective week. I'm glad we worked through all these audio issues. I'm going to skip some of these. Magic Johnson is the man. We know that. Didn't DDP, when he was running his nightclubs, help Kevin?
I think that's true. Yeah, I think DDP.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think that was in the Atlanta days when Kevin was working in an Atlanta nightclub.
As far as Hulk Hogan being in a band, Roz, I'm not. I mean, Hulk Hogan would tell you that he was asked to be the bassist of Metallica. So it depends on who's telling the Hulk Hogan stories.
Okay. Yes. Oh, the two dudes with attitudes.
That was Sean and Diesel.
They were a lot of fun. They were the two chaps with all the straps. I remember him from the NWA WCW era too. When I was young, Bret the Hitman Hart and Hulk Hogan were my first pro wrestlers. Love those two guys myself, Laza. More Mike talk. Mike and his mic.
Yeah.
One of my first feuds I remember was the Mountie versus the Hitman. Wow. You know, it's funny. I learned that the Mountie got a lot of criticism from the people in Canada to the point where they actually made it so that the Mountie was not allowed to wrestle in the fucking nation of Canada. Kind of a funny tidbit. More Mike talk. Remembering when WCW put Rick Rude on their live,
Yeah.
WWE had him pre-recorded. NWO was genius. Yes, the man was on 2 shows in one night.
November of '97.
Dropping down the knowledge. WCW should have done more with Roddy Piper feuding with the end. I don't know, man. I think I say this respectfully, but I think Piper's days might have been behind him at that point, and I think they might have been putting a little too much pressure on Piper to save the day. That's just my opinion, and this isn't a wrestling podcast, so we'll leave it at that. Congress did confirm aliens. Is that true? Wow. I guess I've been living under a rock. I heard about the pilot. I know the pilot was saying all kinds of crazy shit. But man, I guess they're true. ET phone home. Makes the show more authentic. Well, we'll try to fuck up a little more then. Make it super authentic. Thank you for that, Scott. I really appreciate it. Stephen E. says, I had a Ninja Turtles poster. Man, I had Ninja Turtles everything. I had the backpack. I had the lunchbox. I had the action figures. I practically was 50% shell in Turtle when I was a kid. Real quick, drop down your favorite Ninja Turtle. Mine was Raphael. Comments, light them up. With the radio style, it sounds like we're going to hear an ad for soda. Ninja Turtles were on top. I would say in the wrestling world, we say the Ninja Turtles were over. Kevin Nash and Super Shredder. I remember that from Ninja Turtles 2. I think it's actually the first turtle, but I could be wrong. Love Ninja Turtles and Biker Mice from Mars. That one's actually they're doing a reboot of Biker Mice from Mars, I hear. New Age Outlaws. The Russian, that's right. He did have a tugboat gimmick. He had that striped shirt. Kevin Nash is in one of the John Wick films. That's true. Kevin Nash is mixing it up with John Wick. Yeah, there's some movie called The Manor you might want to check out. TNA era. We don't talk about that on this program, or at least I don't. I saw Kevin Nash live at WCW Nitro in Brisbane. Joe also went to a show. I never knew WCW made it down to Australia.
I think in the dying days.
That's a big flight. Giant teddy bears are the big men. Yes, they are. I remember Nash having a huge chest like a lion, a giant man. Yeah, he really was. Just, again, you have no idea how big he is until you see him in person. More audio talk. Charlie Short Films, what's up, brother? Good to see you. Right. He enjoys the Click This podcast. Kevin Nash has a great mind. Laza loves Kevin Nash, basically, is what this
yes.
is down to. Waiting for the release of Tommy's cover of This Magic Moment for Meatheads, coming to a audio listening device near you. Tommy is looking very Scott Hall. Whoa.
Hey, yo.
You know what they always say? Hard work pays off, dreams come true. Bad times don't last. Bad guys do.
No, you got it, buddy. You nailed it.
Greatest Scott Hall quote of all time. Too sweet. Yes, we're always too sweet. Chad Palmer, what's up, brother? Good to see you. Chad's a good Insta buddy of mine, and he's also a big fella. Chad's a big dude. You got to be at least in that 6, maybe 6'8". Chad's a big guy. Lazy writing like WWE. Love the we swore a lot on this show. We're talking about a wrestler, man. It's okay to swear a little when you're talking about the boys. WWE 2K2 PS4 better storylines than WCW itself. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying that, Laza. Chad, it's like continuity from the beginning. Oh, Chad's 6'7". See, it's a big dude. So when you're 6'7", you probably have a little bit of an idea of what it's like to have people turn heads when you're walking in a spot. Laza's 6'2". All right, you guys could be like a decent front court to a basketball team if we were playing some basketball. Dropping down the DNA. Bob Backlund was quite a good wrestler back in the day. Bob Backlund held the title for, I think, 8 years or something crazy like that.
Almost 6.
Chad Palmer throwing up a superhero because these wrestlers are like real-life superheroes to us. Tommy does look like Rick Rude. My strike and vote is next year, March of April. If you win dressed like Rick Rude, you should play him in a movie. Wow, April next year. Geez, I hope not, man. But I do appreciate the fact that you're being honest. And as far as Rick Rude, maybe that's a Halloween costume that we could consider. You know, Halloween is around the corner. Mike, it sounds like you're on a 1080 AM radios. Mike's giving you the weather report or the traffic report from the goddamn helicopter. Having a fight night with Kevin Nash. Fighting a movie with Kevin Nash is pretty cool, Mike. Yeah, Mike did get to mix it up with a Mucho Grande. Yeah, Chad, it would be very rare for you to be looking up at someone. And Kevin Nash he's towering at 6'11", I think, or 6'10". And, you know, everybody, you always got to factor the shoes in, right? Because nobody's barefoot. Shoes are always going to give you, like, at least an inch. Ouch, bro. The cat. Chad says, you got baptized. Now I was. I thought he was going to break my neck at first. Oh, Devo. Yeah, very Devo. Do you happen to know when the collective will be out? Like I said, hopefully soon. All right, guys, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. I just wanted to make sure that
I agree with Andres here. Michelangelo, just because the name is closest to Mike. So I agree with Andres.
Yeah, Andres, Michelangelo was always like the fun one, right? He likes to party. He's got nunchucks. I feel like a whole generation of kids went out and bought a pair of nunchucks just because of Michelangelo. And he's not even a real person. He's a goddamn Ninja Turtle, and he's a mutant. Guys, this was so much fun. I love chatting with y'all, and it's extra fun when we can talk about Big Daddy Cool, Big Sexy, Kevin Nash coming at you. As always, I'm Tommy DiNucci with Mikey Messier, talking and action. We'll see you next week at 11 a.m. on Tuesday when we talk about The Collective. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.